Rusty Ruin is the first level in the game where you actually have to collect flickies. Well, thankfully you don't necessarily have to, because there's actually a treasure hunting mission too. So, that's actually a lot better suited to the level design. Seriously, when you think about it, the flickies are just the treasure hunting. They're just the red rings of this game if they didn't have a radar. The flickies, they have the exact same. In fact, this is actually the level where I discovered the glitch in the first place, where you keep walking into a flicky and you just won't be able to collect it. And even though I clearly have all the flickies, the gold ring still won't allow me to enter it. I even collected all the bingo stuff, hoping that would work and everything. So, is there some sort of secondary goal that they're not telling you about, where you also have to climb through every inch of the level looking for some sort of obtuse switch, as well as finding all the flickies? Generally, this is just a bad level all around. There's a bad frame rate, although not nearly as bad as is in Security Hall, but it's still enough to slightly distract you when you're playing the game. You'll notice right away that dust clouds can hide spike balls on you, and in fact there's a lot of spike balls in this level. Like the spinning variety, the kept still variety, and there's also some fire too. Sometimes fire is put in the most inconvenient of places because they're right next to springs you need to use if you can't fly, and caterpillars that you think you might need to defeat. Because this is one of the biggest problems with the flicky levels, is that you have no way of knowing which particular enemies have flickies. Even Sonic 3D Blast did it better because at least that game kept it consistent by always having flickies in the badness. It doesn't help that the caterpillars and the coconuts are both really annoying enemies to defeat because they're so low to the ground that's kind of awkward trying to homing attack into them because you might air dash instead. And I hate how the coconuts, you can jump into their bombs when you're trying to jump into them, because it's inherently cheap because you need to jump to attack them in the first place, whether that's by stomping on them or by homing attacking them, or you can use like projectiles from afar, which is a good way to deal with most of the enemies in this level. But in general, this level is just a chore, and it's all completely ruined by the glitch that makes it completely impossible to beat. Charmy's tails if his projectile attack was on the LB button instead for some reason, and if his Y button attack slid him into enemies annoyingly. It's kind of hard to get used to and easy to injure yourself with him. I will say that the level has great music. There's a really great remix of Rusty Ruin here. But seriously, who playtested this? I don't understand why they thought this was fun. A combination of a terrible frame rate making it awkward to play, never knowing which enemies actually have the flickies in them, forcing you to kill all of them, it takes forever. The bees immediately rushing at you and always hitting you, even if you're a speed type and thus can homing attack them because they'll attack you from behind or something. And having to constantly switch characters because you have to be able to fly to get around safely without falling into a pit and losing all your flickies. But you also need to have a homing attack to fight well. So you have to switch to speed type if you want to fight well. Or you can just try to awkwardly stomp onto every enemy when you can't see what's below you, so you can easily miss when trying to stomp onto enemies. All this makes this level that I hated too much to even try to beat again. Well, that's a lie. I did try because I had nothing else to do, and I couldn't because of the glitch. It's like a level that it seems to be designed for the flying type because you fly around and it's great for treasure hunting, but it's also not designed for the flying type because it forces you to fight when you can't fight well with the flying type. I mean, projectiles are a neat way of attacking, but it's also very easy to get hit, and if you get hit, you lose your flickies and have to you have to jump precisely into tiny flickies in three-dimensional space. Now for Wave Ocean. And I was looking forward to this level because generally when they try to remake an 06 level, I mean, Crisis City was alright. I mean, it has to be better than it was in 06. But unfortunately, Wave Ocean has the problem where the original level design, like, they don't do quite enough to make the level design different, and so the inherent problem with the level from its original game is just too much to make it fun. See, the big problem with Wave Ocean is that it's too automated. You move so slowly in the scripted loop-de-loops that this level feels boring. See, automation by itself is not a problem, but when you're moving so slowly in the scripted sequences, not to mention they take forever, when you're moving slowly, it doesn't feel exciting, which destroys the entire point of having the scripted sequences there in the first place. So, I spent most of this level not really doing anything, just watching Sonic very slowly run through loop-de-loops, even though he was hitting dash pads at that. This is why I like the boost, because at least with the boost, you can guarantee that you're going fast, and you don't necessarily need to have dash pads there at all to do so. So, yeah. It feels boring to play, because there's just not enough to play. But, at the very least, it looks good right from the start, because water surfing finally works reliably. Which it didn't in 06. You can actually go surf into the loop to the right from the start without clipping to your death. So that's good at least. Water surfing feels good, but you barely ever do it. So, kind of a missed opportunity there. Especially since I love the changes they made to the level design. Like adding more platforming homing attack chains above like pits and stuff. So it's kind of baffling that they don't add more water surfing. But for the most part, I was barely paying attention to the level, to the point of sometimes running into enemies because I spent most of it in overly long scripted sequences that, most importantly, were too slow to be exciting, destroying the point of having them at all. I mean, hitting the springs was fast enough, but the dash pads just aren't fast enough. Like, it kind of feels like they're like the SE2 dash pads, where the burst speed is so terrible, like so short, that it runs out before you can enjoy it. I discovered here that Tails' flight has a height limit, just like in 06. Well, actually I discovered it earlier, but I figured this was the perfect time to mention it. But at least in this game, it'll take a lot longer for you to actually notice that Tails has a height limit for his flight at all, and you won't be really inconvenienced by it, because in this game, Tails actually flies ahead like he's supposed to, rather than it being like in 06, where Tails' flight automatically forces him to go really high up in a really short amount of time, and so you hit the height limit really quickly and then fall down. In this game, his height limit is not really that big of a deal, but it is pretty easy to notice, like in Dawn Avenue and stuff. Going into cabins is pretty cool. Like, it's pretty cool that they're not just decoration, that you can actually go into them, and there's actually item boxes in there. Like, it's a reward for exploring. And they actually encourage you to explore in a way that I don't really agree with. At the end of the level are a bunch of 1-ups. But unfortunately, they're hidden off from you by a barrier. And at the very least, there are hints telling you, like giving you hints about how to get them. But the problem is that instead of encouraging you to explore by just putting the 1-ups in the cabins, they force you to find switches in all of the cabins to unlock 1-ups at the end of the level. It feels like a roundabout, overly convoluted way to reward exploration. Like, I'd rather be able to just instantly find 1-ups in the houses and cut out the middleman. The level's mostly a faithful recreation of the original, but thankfully with the better suited to the Sonic aesthetic egg ponds instead of the generic robots from 06. And they omit the Mach Speed section, which is actually a disappointment to me because they could have had their own try at it. And the Mach Speed zones, like, again, the big problem I have with the Mach Speed zones in this game is that there's enemies there, and there's bottomless pits surrounding you. So they got rid of the huge problem of the original, which was terrible controls, even if the controls are still a little slippery, and they just added their own to make it terrible anyways. Having their own try at the Mach speed zones by having a literal the Wave Ocean section with its level sign we would have actually been able to see what it would have been like if Wave Ocean's Mach speed zone was good. But instead, they don't even bother putting that in the game. Honestly, I think I like Generations Wave Ocean better. At least you had the boost, so you could actually feel fast in the scripted sequences, even if they still took way too long in the loop-de-loops. And like, I don't know. At the very least, Generations Wave Ocean at least had the Mach speed section there, and again, you could boost in it. So you felt fast, and you had the quick step for good turning, although the terrain does actually affect Sonic in the boost sections. And you can tell because you aren't just going forwards when you boost, you're also being moved to the left or right by the terrain. So the quick step alone, you also have to turn actually, but... Also, for some reason I had this weird glitch where the menu didn't have any music at some point, which is kind of weird, and every time that happens it makes me worry that the game's about to crash. And it even continues after you beat another level. Giving Chao Chaos Drives is actually really annoying, not only because they won't stay still, but also because the game added a delay so that you can't instantly give a Chao another Chaos Drive when they're in the process of beating the previous one. It feels very tedious giving them a whole bunch of Chaos Drives in this game, because they take so long to eat a Chaos Drive, and in the adventure games I feel like you could just give them one after the other a lot faster. I had my hopes up for Crazy Gadget, but unfortunately this is yet another city escape scenario where it's just an inferior version of a level that was better in a game made in 2001. Someone who designed this level left 06 a little bit too much because there's a lot of forced combat littering this level. And it's hard to, the big problem with that is that it's hard to see from a distance that the red lasers of the laser gates that generally force you to fight have disappeared. Because it's not like the gates disappear completely when you defeat all the enemies. The problem is that the walls making up the laser gate that you have to run between are red as well as the lasers that disappear when you defeat all the enemies. So it's visually confusing. So it can be easy to end up slamming into lasers all the damn time because the gates don't really look that different after you've beaten all of the enemies. This level can be confusing, partly because they don't tell you what the switches actually do, which caused me to almost not beat the level because I was stuck and didn't know that the switch took down the laser gate. The laser gate that is in a different hallway that actually looks identical to the one I've already been, which is also confusing. Speaking of that exact same section, there's one point where I died because I was told by Hint that I couldn't lightspeed dash, and I'd have to hit a switch to do that. But I proved that was bullshit, and then fell to my death, because I was so confused by the fact that I could lightspeed dash that I moved. You shouldn't be able to move during a lightspeed dash and end up dying because you're no longer facing the right way. The forced combat in this level can also get kind of annoying, especially with the artificial chaos. Vector is a terrible character who sucks. He can't even really glide all that well, and he has no homing attack at all, so he can't fight worth shit. This is just another power type character that sucks because he's just like Omega with barely any range for his attacks at all. One of the most disappointing things about this level is that it's lacking the anti-gravity gimmick completely and handles the Tetris section with springs, forced combat to progress, and a lack of direction that leads you to think that you have to switch to a flying type to progress at one point. At one point, one of the arrows seems to be leading you down, and you don't really trust it not to send you to a bottomless pit like an HD Eggman land. So it can be confusing. Dry Lagoon is a pretty easy level, which makes sense because it was Rouge's first level in SAE2. Just like Wild Canyon, it has the balloon mission be really easy because all you have to do is step on this obvious teleporter that's there right from when you start the level, or otherwise it's easy to find,
and then you just go to a bunch of teleporters and pop the balloons. It's slightly harder than Wild Canyons in that you can't just go to the right teleporter every single time and get the balloons. But all you have to do is then just go to the left one time, and there you go. So it's pretty easy. But the only reason I took such a long time, as in like a couple minutes, to get to that teleporter maze was because I wasn't expecting it to be that easy. I wasn't expecting that all I had to do was go to the teleporter. So I did what I usually do in these kinds of missions and search through every inch of the room of the level I was in. The level is a pretty faithful recreation of the original game. It even has, it doesn't bother to have the turtle come back, which sucks because that gave the level charm. It was a unique set piece. Instead, you just hit a switch and teleport to the next area of the level. And it's kind of annoying to have two separate areas of a treasure hunting level because you can search through the entirety of the area and the radar doesn't go off. So then you have to go to the next area and then the radar will go off. It's not really that big of a deal though. Pig is like Vector. He can glide with his parasol rather than having a homing attack. But like with Vector, he descends so much when he's gliding that it's kind of pointless when you can glide with Knuckles or Fly. And he also, he at least has his melee attacks from heroes, so he feels familiar enough. But, I don't know. The power types sucking in this game really does help to emphasize the point that having a power type in heroes was kind of pointless. I mean, you could have just had the Stomp for the speed type instead of needing to have them be the ones belly flopping into stuff. And you didn't have to have the power types punch flip panels. You could have just homing attacked into them or like kicked them with the speed type or something. The power type in Heroes was basically artificially forced to be useful just for the sake of having a game based around Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles playing at the same time in the same level, when really you could have just as well had just Sonic and Tails. So it makes sense that the power types suck here because they don't really have a purpose. They can glide, but you have a flying type for that. And it's not like, even if they do deal more damage, like, do they defeat multi-hit enemies in one shot? I don't think they do. But even then, it wouldn't be enough to justify playing as them.